謝いたしましたけれども、これから音楽の力を伝え、コミュニティをつなげる。
To this session where we're going to be talking about how to communicate the power of music and linking communities together. This is an event which is being co-organized with the British Council, which is the cultural arm for the United Kingdom, and the Japan Foundation, which are both organizations involved in cultural exchange and cultural communication. We're very, very happy to be able to welcome so many people to this event. And we actually have to confess that the response was so astounding that we didn't quite expect quite so many people to actually turn up, which is why we have to apologize for the size of this room. And we want to make this into a casual, informal session. It might be that you'll find it a bit difficult to see the panelists or to see the slides. If you do have a problem with that, please tell us, and we'll try to see what we can do to hope to give you a better experience. And we'd also like to mention that you have receivers in front of you, which should have been on your chairs. The channels are Channel 3 is English, should be this one, and Channel 2 is for Japanese. So please remember to make sure that you have your receivers with you at all times and that they're adjusted to the right channel. Also, please just make sure that your mobile phones have been turned off or they have been turned on to silent mode. And first of all, on behalf of the organizers, we'd like to call upon Deputy Director of the British Council here in Japan, Alison Beale. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alison Beale, and I'm Deputy Director of the British Council here in Japan. It gives me great pleasure to be able to say a few words on behalf of the organizers. I'd like to begin by thanking all of you for joining us at a very busy time of the year. And in Japan, we are aware that people are more aware of the role of orchestras, of musical, of concert halls, and also of theaters. The role of such institutions and the relationship with society is the focus of a great deal of debate. Also, following the earthquake of the 11th of March last year, the role of the publicly run halls and the local orchestras have been reassessed, and they have become the focus of a great deal of discussion and consideration as well. We have similar discussions in the United Kingdom in the cultural sphere. Now that there is an overall tendency for public support for the arts and culture to be cut, there are issues relating to how we can establish solid economic foundations and financial foundations for cultural institutions, and how we can strengthen their ties with local communities, and also help to foster new audiences, which happen to be important issues for the United Kingdom as well. Today we're going to be hearing from Kathryn McDowell, who is from the London Symphony Orchestra, which is renowned for its innovative involvement in these fields, is very highly evaluated for these activities, and is one of the cultural institutions in the United Kingdom which is well known for their activities. They, of course, are one of the leading orchestras of the world. They are headquartered at the Barbican Centre at the Barbican in London, and they have about 70 or more concerts in a year, and they also travel very extensively. They also have very strong ties with Japan. 1963 was the first year that they toured Japan, and since then, for approximately half a century, they have continued to visit Japan regularly to perform, and they have won the support of many music fans in Japan as well. The LSO is not limiting its activities just to the concert hall. They also reach out to all generations, from children to the old age pensioners. Approximately 60,000 people in a year are provided with opportunities to come into contact with music through the Discovery program, and also through LSO Live and iTunes. They have been exploring many other channels which allow access to the outstanding music which is created by the LSO to even more people. And They have very kindly spared time out of their very busy tour of Japan, where the brass quintet from LSO is touring in this country. We're very happy to be able to welcome Kathryn McDowell, Managing Director of the LSO. And she will be speaking together with the guest speakers who are involved in activities in Japanese orchestras and also concert halls. And we look forward to seeing a vigorous and interesting discussion that we hope we're going to be able to witness this evening. And we also hope that this will be the opportunity to further explore opportunities for contact between the cultural sector in Japan and United Kingdom. And in closing, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to the speakers for their tremendous support and also to the Japan Foundation for making this event possible. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Alison, Bio. And this forum provides us with an opportunity to look at the issues which Japanese concert halls and arts organizations are facing. We're going to be hearing from Shin Kodama and Kazumi Minoguchi and Mr. Matsumoto from the Sendai Philharmonic. We've got an outstanding lineup, and they will be sharing insights from each of their perspectives. So first of all, we'd like to begin by asking Kathryn McDowell to come and give the keynote speech. So could you please use that lectern over there? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much indeed for those very generous words of welcome. It's a great pleasure to be here and to see so many people here with an interest in this very important area of work. Thank you very much to the British Council and to the Japan Foundation for making this opportunity possible. And tonight, I hope that we have the chance to share our different experiences across the world together, and that we can learn from what you are doing, and that you will also have an idea of the projects and the aspirations that we have as the London Symphony Orchestra. So first of all, I would like to just give you a little background to the orchestra. We were founded in 1904. We are a self-governing orchestra, which means that the musicians take a key role in all the decision-making of the orchestra. We invite the great conductors to work with us. We have a principal conductor as opposed to a music director, which is a careful balance of power. And in our first half century, our first 50 years, we had a London season, we had international tours from the outset, and we also did many films and recordings. Now, thinking about this area of governance, it's important to understand that the members of the LSO are the shareholders. In the early days, they shared the profits and they shared the loss. But after public funding came in from the government, then we had to set up a non-for-profit organization, a charity. And that meant that any profit was contracted back to the company and the musicians were paid an agreed fee. The board composition of the LSO now is 7 playing directors, including the chairman of the orchestra, who will always be a musician, and 6 non-playing directors, including me as the managing director. And those 6 non-playing directors, the other 5, are leading figures from the world of business. So they bring very special expertise to our musical table. Now, this type of company has a major impact, I believe, on the whole nature of the company. It has an impact on the discipline within the orchestra, because the orchestra takes responsibility for that. It also has an impact on the pay and the working conditions. I would say it's more flexible as a result. And it also has a very important impact on the morale and the sense of responsibility. And for me, that sense of responsibility is something that we share as an organization. So we have no real secrets in that sense. And I think it leads to a more mature conversation about the direction of the company and what is important for us as the London Symphony Orchestra to do. Looking at the LSO today, a quick rundown. We have around 100 playing members of the orchestra and around 55, 60 staff. We have our residency in the Barbican Centre in London, where we do 70 concerts a year. We have our international touring, which is between 50 and 70 concerts every year, so it's a high level. Then we have our commercial work, which has been there from the outset, but it varies. Sometimes there's a lot, sometimes less so. Then we have LSO Live, our recording label, LSO Discovery, our education and community, and LSO St. Luke's, our home of the Discovery project. Then looking very briefly at our finances for the LSO, we have a turnover of around 17.7 million, and I can't count it in yen. 25% of that is from the public purse, from the Arts Council and from the local authority. And this is the figure that has gradually been going down. The amount from the Arts Council and the city has only gone down a little, but we've had to raise more from elsewhere to keep pace with inflation and to keep the LSO in the position we want it to be in. Then we have around 30% from the private sector, and by that I mean business sponsorship, individual patrons, trusts and foundations, and we have a box office, which you will be surprised to know is a very small percentage of the overall turnover, because we want to keep our ticket prices accessible. And then we have around 45% through our engagements and earned income. So that would be the international work, the commercial work, all the occasions when other people hire the LSO to perform. Now, I would look at the different areas of work in more detail. First of all, the Barbican Residency, set up 1981 when the Barbican opened, where we give between 45 and 50 evening concerts every year. We give around 25 education concerts and events, and we have a family of conductors. This is very important to the LSO, that we have this whole group of wonderful artists who work with us. Sir Colin Davis as president, Valery Gergiev as principal conductor, Michael Tilson-Thomas and Daniel Harding as principal guest conductors, Andre Previn as conductor laureate, and regular guests who come year on year to us. And then we also have a number of very special relationships with artists, many of whom are known to you in Japan. Anne-Sophie Mutter, Vengerov, Lang Lang, Midori, Yo-Yo Ma, Nikolai Snyder, Kavakos, to name but a few. And we like to think that we have a long-standing relationship with these people and that they will come and maybe do special things with us. Concerts, some education work, some work with our young students. And so they can do a range of work with us now. And we also have our composers. Historically, we had a relationship with Edward Elgar, more recently with Leonard Bernstein, and now with people like Pierre Boulez, George Benjamin, James Macmillan, and Thomas Adès. Then looking at the international work, we have residency relationships in Paris, in Aix-en-Provence in France, in New York, and to an extent sometimes in Suntory Hall, when in a residency we bring a major artistic project, so it might be the complete Prokofiev symphonies, maybe with some seminars around it, with some discovery work. It's an opportunity to bring the artistic projects that are really central to the LSO. But then we often are touring elsewhere in Europe. We're also going to the developing countries of China, developing markets in Brazil, in India, and in Russia. And sometimes we go to Australia. So the international program is a very major part of our overall work. The commercial side has been up and down over the years. At the moment, it's actually remarkably strong, and the film work has come back to London. You will know of us as the orchestra of Star Wars in the 70s and the 80s. And then there was a period in the 90s when the film work was being done in Eastern Europe, elsewhere. But now some of it's coming back, and so Harry Potter and the King's Speech and other things. And it's an important part of our overall ecology. Then we have our recordings. In the past, we recorded a great deal for the major labels, but then that changed, and I'll mention that later. Now we tend to do vanity recordings where people are able to pay for the opportunity of recording with the LSO. And because of these changes in the recording industry, we had to rethink what we do. And so we set up LSO Live in the year 2000. This was because the major labels were not doing any recording of orchestral work with us. And so we had a dialogue with them to say, we want to record this work, and we really want to record the major artistic projects that we have. We thought that the clever thing would be to respond to the new developing digital market. And so we tailored the label to this. It's a small team. We're working very much in this area of iTunes and of digital download. But we also still provide the CD, and Japan is our second largest market in the world. So you still like the CD. But the great advantage for us in this was that we could develop new arrangements with our musicians. And it goes back to the makeup of the orchestra, that they agreed that we should record from the live concert. And then when the recording is issued and we start to make some profit, then we pay this back in a royalty to the musicians. So it's quite a different model from the musicians expecting to have the fee up front. And I think the musicians of the LSO were very far-sighted in saying, we will do this together. It's the way forward. Otherwise, we will not be recorded. And therefore, as well, it can reflect the LSO's major artistic plans. So, for instance, recently, we were performing the Nielsen symphonies with Sir Colin Davis. And those symphonies are not so well known, but we've been able to make the recordings of those. And I believe those recordings will become very well known in the future, as happened with his recordings of Sibelius and Berlioz. And now we have around over 80 releases, which are distributed in all the major territories. Now, turning to LSO Discovery. This was established with the London Symphony Orchestra in 1990. The LSO's mission, our purpose, can be described as making the greatest music available to the widest range of people. And that means going beyond the concert hall and the audience that will come to see us in the concert hall in London. So the LSO was thinking about the wider responsibility of a 20th century orchestra at that time. How we would contribute something into the local community. How we would put something back in a way saying thank you for the fact that we have money from the taxpayer through our public subsidy, and thinking how we could enrich the whole programme of music education in Britain for young people, and seeking to reach all types of backgrounds, because Britain is now, and especially London, is a very multicultural place, and many people do not have a history of classical music. So we can use aspects of our Discovery programme to introduce people, young people very often, from different backgrounds to classical music. Maybe their parents don't know about it, but they can find out about it, they can learn about it, and they can take home a very good experience. And then it is also about broadening the roles of the musicians. And we will talk about that a little bit more. Pierre Boulez once said that the orchestra of the future is the ensemble of possibilities. And I've thought that is a beautiful way of describing this whole range of work that we can do, because the orchestra that you see on the stage can become an ensemble of possibilities. And nowadays, in the year 2012, there are 4 major areas of LSO Discovery work, reaching around 60,000 people every year. We have the young talent area, the schools programme, the community side, and our digital side. Now, looking at these 4 areas in a little bit more detail. First of all, the young talent side. And here I would like to introduce to you the LSO On Track programme. This we set up around 4 or 5 years ago because we realised that we needed to support the instrumental learning of young people in schools. And we established a relationship with 10 of the local authorities in the east of London. It's around 1/3 of the London schools. And we said, instead of just one project, we would like to do a series of projects that will go on over a period of years. And we would like to work in great detail with your teachers, and we would like to support the work that they are doing week in, week out. And so I have a DVD of some of this work, and we will just put it on now. And you will notice in the DVD that there is a great mix of backgrounds, of types of young people, also of ages, some little ones, some bigger ones. And the whole point of this programme is that they can all play together. We've had to commission music, special arrangements, so that they can do this together. And they have the opportunity then to play with the members of the LSO. And so instead of it just being a single project, it goes on over time, and we're able to work with these 10 different areas, reaching around 5,000 young people each year. Here is one of them. That's an LSO player. And then we'll move to the wind and brass. It's a similar type of project called the Light of Spring. So you can see them all of different abilities working together. Then we have a different project called Centre for Orchestra, which is for senior students who are already studying at conservatoire. And this is something that we are developing to give them the experience of orchestral studies. So often the musicians tell me that when they audition, young prospective members of the LSO, they are not prepared for the life in the orchestra. And so this is a program jointly with our local conservatoire, the Guildhall School, and we hope that we will develop a master's in orchestral studies from next year. Then we have work with composers. We work a lot with young composers to give them the opportunity to work with the orchestra for the first time. And indeed, on this brass quintet tour, we have commissioned one of the young composers, Christian Mason, who first worked with us around 3 years ago. And his piece is performed on this tour. So we now have a family of young composers who have a strong link with the LSO, and I hope they will keep that throughout their careers and come back and work with us in the future. Similarly, with the conductors, we have workshops and we have a conducting competition. Then we have an LSO Academy, which is a summer school. And I have a little excerpt to show you of the summer school. This is the time the brass are meeting. Every year it's maybe brass, the next year will be woodwind, the next year will be strings. And so this is the top end of the Young Talent Programme. Our principal trumpet, one of them. Watch this boy. The gentleman conducting is a principal trumpet, Rod Franks. But the young man at the start of that excerpt is Philip Cobb. He became the most promising student in that Brass Academy 2008. And on our brass quintet, this tour of Japan, Philip is principal trumpet. And he was appointed soon after that, just 2 years after that. So we met him through the Brass Academy. He was a student in the conservatoire next door. So I wanted you to see that it can come all the way through. And I'd like now to introduce to you Patrick Harold, who is also on the Brass Quintet tour. He is the principal tuba. If we can maybe have a little more light, please. He's principal tuba of the LSO, and he has been in the orchestra since 1988. And Patrick, I wondered if you could give everyone a little example of your work with the Young Talent Programme.
As Kathryn says, this is the whole idea of everything we do really is probably twofold. It's to bring on and seek the finest talent in both conducting, composition, and playing, but also to feed and nurture not merely the London Symphony Orchestra, but the whole musical and, at this level, professional aspect of our world. So we don't just want to look after London Symphony Orchestra Limited. The people that come through our academies, that come through the composition schemes, the conducting programs, I hope, and in fact I know, that the tentacles of that activity spread and spread and spread, and there's a benefit not only to us, but to the much wider professional musical community. The schemes that we have, that I've been involved in since the very beginning, involve first of all performance. We have a recruitment program, initially a training program, for string, we call it string experience. And in that context, people are auditioned at the music colleges by members of the LSO to see if they might be suitable for, I'm not doubling up on what you're talking about, am I? Good. Am I? No. No, I hope not. To see if they might be suitable to sit in the orchestra and play with other players. They only come in for a rehearsal. They then are discussed in their absence, and if they've done well, they're invited to return and maybe do another rehearsal. They're not paid for that. Then there are further discussions, and there's a kind of funnel that happens, and the very finest of them will actually be invited to take part in a concert. When they are selected for that, they are paid, and what we will do is we will play one player over strength. So instead of playing with 16 first violins, we may have 17 on that day. And the idea for that, of course, is to really give the most wonderful exposure to what we hope is the best orchestral playing that those young talents have come across. And to reward them for it, but to introduce them to the orchestra. And a byproduct of that, from our point of view, is I think now we have had about 15 members of the string section who have come through that scheme. They don't bypass an audition by any means. They have to go through all that rigor of trials and auditions, but they do get an exposure and an experience of the orchestra ahead of what they might otherwise have gained. Of course, there are all the other people that don't join the LSO but join other orchestras, and there are many of them that I come across. So I'm very proud of that. We replicate that in the wind and brass in as much as we can by going to the music colleges and doing what we call side-by-side. So a group of players will go along, they will do an intense 2-hour coaching session on a particular piece of work, and then they will come together for another 2 hours, and then I stand in front of them and say, ready, steady, go, and it's called conducting. It isn't. But that gives them an exposure again to our players and our way of working and thinking about orchestral playing. The academies, of course, Kathryn's already touched upon, and the Centre for Orchestra. The composition scheme, of course, we mustn't have orchestras that exist in a museum. We must live in the 21st century and not merely the 19th century. In order to do that, we must give composers an opportunity to have their work played. We must accept that a great deal of that work will actually disappear, like a great deal of the work of 19th century composers and 18th century composers disappeared. What we're left with in the canon of orchestral music, and actually all music, is the creme de la creme. There's plenty of other music that's really rather good. So we really seriously work at developing the talents of young composers. We workshop their pieces. They're auditioned in the sense that their work is presented to a panel of composers and players who have an interest in contemporary music. A number of them are selected. They are workshopped in project-based schemes at our education centre, and then the very finest of those pieces will actually be programmed, and they're not in the printed programme, they are slipped in as kind of overtures, and often introduced to the orchestra, to the audience, and it is initially a very dangerous tactic, but actually has now become an accepted part of the work of the orchestra. And I think many of our audiences actually quite look forward to something quite different.
And Patrick, could I ask you why you have got involved as a musician in this part of the LSO's work?
I think that I really believe that music has the power to change people's lives. It's not a commercial thing as far as I'm concerned. It's a fundamental. I have always given a great chunk of my time to the National Youth Orchestra, and I spend a great deal of time working with the youngsters that come through the LSO schemes, because I feel that one has a moral obligation to pay back. I feel that one has an intelligent obligation to develop young talent, because that is the future of what I've given my life for, the orchestra. And I also feel that we have a very selfish interest in developing and promoting audiences. So there are three, as far as I'm concerned, very tangible reasons for my involvement and most of my colleagues.
Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. Thank you, Patrick. Now, moving on to the schools programme, just a brief overview. This was actually the first area that we addressed in Discovery activity when we started in the early 90s. And first of all, we looked at the music curriculum in schools. It was a special time in the UK when music was becoming part of the national curriculum. So that was a catalyst for us developing these projects that related precisely to what children had to learn in schools. And they were being expected to work creatively, to create their own music. And that was quite a new phase of development. And many music teachers were quite terrified about that. So there was a very important role for the LSO and other orchestras in helping the teachers to develop those skills and to take the fear out of new music, as Patrick was saying. And these schools projects became really the core of the work, and then the related, what we call continuing professional development for the teachers. And here is a little DVD of a creative project. That was
Shall we try and sing a song all together? Yeah. Right, nice and quiet for the beginning.
This was a project with a normal classroom, and the children who could play an instrument did so. The children who had no instrument were using percussion, and they were taking a piece of John Adams as the inspiration and the starting point for that piece of music, and then they attended the concert that John Adams was conducting with the LSO. And then looking at the next DVD, which is our Sound Explorer project.
Storms keep creeping round the house. Oh, yeah. Never
see members of the LSO playing, and this lady, Rachel, who is one of our animateurs. She is a musician by training, but she has specialised and done further training in this area of developing and presenting these education projects. And so I'm now going to invite Jonathan Lipton, who is a horn player in the LSO and who has done many, many of these schools-based projects over his 26-year career with the London Symphony Orchestra. Jonathan.
Thank you. We all love, as professional musicians, to play scales and arpeggios and practice our orchestral excerpts. But personally speaking, nothing gives me as great pleasure as going to a school like that and turning up to play for children who have never seen a French horn before. And they're sitting there minding their own business, playing, being noisy, and you get the horn out and they go and you play and they go like this. And every time it makes my skin. A small anecdote, I remember walking around the Barbican and quite a scary looking young gentleman came up to me and said, "I know you. You came to my school 5 years ago, and because of your visit, I now am in the music producing profession. I loved what you brought to my," and this is absolute true story. I was really quite frightened because he was quite a scary looking guy. He was one of those guys, you know what I'm saying? And he, it is, for us as players who are involved in this scheme of work, it is as passionately satisfying as any Bruckner cycle that we have done with Sir Colin, which we do adore. To be able to create music with these children, not just have them play their scales and arpeggios, but from nothing. We give them the ingredients of the Rite of Spring. Here are a few rhythms, here's some melody, here's some harmony. Go off into a room with one of the players and create your own version. They will then come to the Barbican and hear Stravinsky's version. They can decide. And sometimes theirs is better. One of the other things that we do with Rachel, she has developed, Rachel Leach, has developed a course for training teachers called the CPD, Continuing Professional Development, enabling teachers, primary school teachers, who perhaps have no courage or no experience in working with children with music in their own classrooms, and this enables them to feel secure with a group of children and a group of xylophones, which sounds like quite a scary prospect, but give a group of children, a group of xylophones, and a teacher who has some confidence, and it is extraordinary what you can come up with. If this opens a few doors for the children to enjoy music, for me, it's not about audience building, it's about broadening opportunities for the children, just to hear music in a different way and be creative with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Thank you very much. Great. So you can see the wide range of interests that we have in this work and the wide range of rationales and thinking that we have even within our group here today. And that's the secret of this work for me. Now, in going on through the list on the school, we touched on the continuing professional development for the teachers. Then we also have many family events. These are concerts that we do at the weekend that are based very often on the school's work, but are presented by people like Rachel in a slightly more fluid way that everyone can enjoy. And so the LSO musicians and our animateurs are absolutely central to this work. It's not a separate team who do this work. And for me, that is absolutely the key to the work, that it is integrated into all our thinking. How can we do something for discovery within this Stravinsky project that Gergiev might be doing, or whatever? So we're always thinking in that way. Now, in 2003, there was a major new development for the LSO, and that was the opening of LSO St. Luke's, the home of LSO Discovery. And I pay tribute to my predecessor and to the orchestra for taking the risk in developing this beautiful building. You can see below, it's a very inspiring space. It's a very beautiful space. And so when we put our discovery projects in there, you can just feel the young people really stepping out and thinking, I'm proud of this. And we work with all ages in this building also, and it works for every different type of person also. We also have our orchestra rehearsals in this hall, and we also have a concert series. We do a lot of more crossover type of work in the hall. We have a lunchtime series, and other people like to hire it as well. We also hire it commercially for conferences. Maybe 2 days a week we have hires, and that is the way that we keep the business plan working so that we can have it available for discovery work for the rest of the time. Now, having LSO St. Luke's opened up all the possibilities for new areas of discovery work, we were able to really think about the community that is around us. St. Luke's is only a short walk, 10 minutes, from the Barbican Centre, which is our home for our concert performances. But suddenly you are in a very different area of London, a much more poor area with a very diverse population. And so we've been able to develop a whole range of activity for that local community, youth and community choirs. We have an Indonesian gamelan, and so we have courses in the gamelan. We have community concerts, most of which are free, when the LSO musicians or the Guildhall School students will perform. We have a lot of activity with special needs, the disabled and people with learning difficulties. And again, the building works very well for them. And we also work with older people, the elderly, and from early years, the little tiny tots are wonderful in this building also. And we also go out from St. Luke's with our programme to the hospitals. So through the community programme, we've really been able to think about this potential of music to transform people's mental state, to touch their emotions, and perhaps to heal, to offer comfort in difficult situations. Now, as many of you know, you have had all your own difficulties to bear, and we have so admired the way in which the Japanese people have coped with the disasters of the last 12 months. And I know you have programs to tell us about and to share with us of how music can really transform a very difficult situation. And so I hope this gives you some idea of the range of our work. St. Luke's also opened up the opportunity for digital technology. We have a technology room where many of the young teenagers will come and create their own music. And the resources at LSO St. Luke's also enable a national and international programme through schools' video sessions, through the YouTube Symphony. I'm sure some of you have interacted with that, which was really a worldwide Google project, but a lot of it started from LSO St. Luke's. And in the future, we'll be putting many of our school projects onto digital format and taking them from St. Luke's. But one thing I would like to say about the programme is that the musicians come forward for this and they self-select the projects that they feel comfortable doing. And there are many different people, very different characters, who will do different things. Not everybody will do a hospital visit. Not everybody will do a creative project in schools. And not everybody will want to coach young players. But I believe that every member of the orchestra can engage in some way with discovery. And for us, the research, the impact of discovery, the research shows that this musical activity can really make a difference. A head of music said to me just recently, this project is the best thing that's ever happened to our young people. And he really meant it. I was quite touched. And so we look for proper evaluation of the work. We look for a rigor in our assessment of it. We know that it can improve self-confidence and promote better well-being. We know that it can improve the teamwork in schools, and it can improve the social interaction amongst people who find it maybe difficult to work together. And it gives young people life skills that go well beyond music into whatever field of life they will be involved in. And so finally, I just would like to respond to a question that people have asked me about how these programs have developed in Britain over the last 25 years. First of all, it was theatre and dance and opera who got involved in education activities back in the 70s. It was then in the mid-80s that the orchestras got on board. And I think in the early days, we learnt quite a lot from opera and the approach that they took. There are many different approaches to this work, as you can see from our own programme, and not every orchestra does all the different types of work. It's very important that people have their own specialisms in this work. Many of us started with the help of the animateurs. There was one particular gentleman called Richard McNichol, who was originally a player in a London orchestra, and he led much of this work. But then he's given his skills to animateurs like Rachel and to all of our musicians. And then the musicians teach each other, and it's also part of our programme with the young people in the conservatoire. But in the early 90s, the orchestra sector in the United Kingdom wanted to take this work very seriously. At that time, there were about 5 orchestras: the London Sinfonietta, the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, and indeed the London Symphony Orchestra were doing this work. And others wanted to learn how. And so the lead body for our sector, which is the Association of British Orchestras, mounted a project called the Turn of the Tide. And in the end, there were 16 orchestras that got involved in that project. And this was a great way of passing on the skills. There was training from the musicians, there was a new commission from Peter Maxwell Davies, and there was national profile as a result, which gave a lot of recognition at board level within the orchestras. And so from the 5 orchestras originally involved, there were 16 by 1992 who had education managers and who had orchestras who were involved in this. And now I would say that every orchestra in the United Kingdom that is publicly funded has some form of programme. It's important that these are different, that they reflect the unique character of each orchestra and the type of community that they are working in. And it's very important that they don't just copy one another, but that they respond to the needs that they have around them. And what we're finding now is that it's not only important to the public funders, it's also important to the private sector, because many of the businesses have their own corporate social responsibility programs. And so in becoming our partners to sponsor a concert or whatever, they want to know that we are also committed to our local communities. And so I would like to finish with a quotation from Peter Maxwell Davies, the composer. He said this back in 1992, and for me it's still absolutely true, and I hope possibly true here for you in Japan. A great deal of orchestra's work in the future will be outreach, making people aware of what orchestras do and can do. It is, in effect, the democratization of classical music. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank Jonathan and Patrick for joining us in this presentation. Thank you, Kathryn.